I will present the foreigners in Seoul. Last Sunday, I visited Insadong in Jongno-gu, Seoul. I decided this place for my work because this is one of the famous places to foreigners. Question 1. What nationalities have you seen? I saw Western and European people at most. And secondly, I could see some Asian travelers like Japanese and Chinese. Question 2. Which nationalities are predominant? As I told you, I could see the Western and European people mostly often, and then I could see some of Japanese and Chinese travelers sometimes. Question 3. In 100 words or more, describe why the nationalities you saw were in those number ratios. First, Insadong is famous for the Korean traditional culture. We could see some of traditional products in Insadong, so many travelers buy that. I thought that Western people are interested in Korean cultures rather than Asian travelers because our culture is really different from their own cultures, so it could be interesting for them. For example, Japanese travelers are interested in shopping in Korea, so I could see Japanese travelers more often when I visit the Myeongdong, which is one of Korea's famous shopping place. Question 4. Did you see any international couples? What kind? Describe in approximately 100 words. Actually, I couldn't see many interracial couples. I only saw 2 interracial couples. One of them was three men, 2 old Western men and 1 young Korean man. It seems like the young Korean man introduces Insadong to the 2 old Western men. I didn't see the relationship between them accurately. Yeah. And next is a Southeastern man and a Western woman. They looks like friends, just friends, and I'm not sure, but suppose that they live in Korea because they didn't look like the travelers. So, question 5. How were the different nationalities acting differently? Which ones were more audacious, reticent, and contained? Why? Describe in approximately in 100 words. First, Western people was reticent. They just looked around in Sadong and asked some questions to sellers. And the group of Western people was small. They usually consist of 2 people. Next, Japanese people were a little contained. I thought about that from the small actions, and their group were small also. Lastly, Chinese people were audacious. Some Chinese talked loudly on the road, and their group was the most big, rather than other nationalities. Question 6. How were the reactions of Koreans to foreigners and foreigners to Koreans? I couldn't see the reactions of Koreans to foreigners and foreigners to Korean because um, most of group was not interracial, so I couldn't see uh, the situation except the relationship between a seller and a customer. Some foreigners asked some questions to Korean sellers, and in the questions, Korean seller was very kind. They looked like have learned the other languages, so they talked about their products to foreigners in other languages. Mm. And in addition, they prepared the presentation in other languages, so some of the sellers had their presentation in on the roads, so it attracted some foreigners. Question 7. Did you notice any foreigners were familiar with Korean culture? Explain why. Yeah, I noticed about it from the culture of food, because some foreigners were eating the road foods in Insadong. Many of them ate tteokbokki, and I think that is most famous food in Korea.